Oh, it's a pig. Welcome to the Lake Erie Kayak Anglers Podcast, the podcast designed to make you a better angler. I'm Chuck Earls with Lake Erie Kayak Fishing.com. Today I have Katie Backa joining us. Katie is a competitive kayak fishing angler who travels all over the nation. She is also a very experienced and skilled kayak fishing instructor, as well as an instructor for the Women's Fishing Federation. Katie, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely.
So let's get started. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
So like you said, my name's Katie Backa. I'm originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My husband and I moved down to Texas about 4 years ago and got into competitive kayak bass fishing. At the time when we were up north, that was really not a thing, and people kind of looked at us kind of crooked when they'd see us fishing out of a kayak. But down here, it was totally normal. So we got into doing that. And did our first event was actually the Lone Star Throwdown, which is the biggest tournament in Texas and pretty much the nation. It draws a huge number of anglers, and it's all of Texas competing against all of Texas. So you're split up into regions. So that was our first experience in competitive fishing. And in the following year, we actually got into doing trails, and we've been doing that ever since. And fortunately, I run a fishing website with lots of educational information. And all of those things combined led us to be very fortunate to get a lot of sponsors and turn this into more of a career than just a hobby. So that's a little bit of my background.
And what is your website?
fishlikeacat.com, and it's fish like a cat with a K.
I like that.
Mm-hmm.
I will definitely link that in the description so you can get there easily. A buddy of mine, Mike Lon, he told me one day, actually I was paying him for a guide trip. He's a guide out in Matlacha, Florida. And he said, Chuck, it's a lifestyle, not a job. And I had just ended a long period, a contract I was doing. And I was in between jobs, kind of looking for my way, looking for my path. And I didn't really want to go back to what I just finished doing. And, he got me out on the water. I learned a lot that day. He really opened up my eyes to this being a possibility, to creating a job, so to speak, out of your passion, just like you have done. And one thing that always pops back in my head is that saying, it's a lifestyle, it's not a job. How do
Absolutely.
we work 18, 20 hours a day sometimes that it takes? Well, because it's a lifestyle, it's a passion. We
Right.
do it
And
for much
that's a
more than
lot
a
of people.
paycheck.
Right. And I don't think a lot of people completely appreciate that or understand that. There's a lot of people still who think a lot of this just boils down to like how much social media can you put out there. And if you crank out insane amounts of basic content and grip and grins, that's the ticket. That's how you do it, when it is so much more than that. I actually purposefully do not crank out content, multiple times a day, or even sometimes even multiple times a week, depending on our travel schedule. And that's purely just because I would rather put out solid, good content less frequently than, more fluffy content every day, if that makes sense.
Oh, it definitely makes sense. And some of it comes down to what's the best use of your time. And it's not that content's not a good idea, but when you're running nonstop, you know what? You need that 4 hours of sleep, not
Right.
an hour and a half to 2 hours, because you're trying to figure out what to post on, how to say this or how to post this trip. Like I've been so busy lately. I've been on the water nonstop with clients, come home, get everything ready, take everything apart, reset it up for the next day. And then you just got to get some sleep. So I have probably 3 or 4 weeks of stuff that I should post, I need to post, but
Oh, dude, I totally feel you on that one. I'm like the biggest offender of like I run a website, but I have all of the social media outlets. And I do have a YouTube channel which has, I don't know, a whopping 8 videos on it maybe. Um, but I have hundreds and hundreds of hours of footage of like solid fish catching machine footage that I just haven't figured out how to like balance that editing into my schedule at all.
yeah, editing's another story. The short videos are nice
Yeah,
because you can kind of get the point across. You can make it short. It's not like a YouTube video. Most people don't realize a 3 to 5 minute YouTube video. I mean, until you get fast and good and efficient, that could be 5 to 10 hours of editing if you want
exactly.
something good.
And that's actually one thing I was super grateful for Jeff Little pushing me on was doing Instagram reels.
Yeah,
Um, I am still like in the infancy of doing that, so I am by no means an expert at it, but it definitely is to a point. It's way more fun to do that sort of like raw 30-second down and dirty than all of the like really polished and critiqued video. Um, there's an element that's really fun about that.
and I think there's a lot more value because people nowadays, myself included, we have a short attention span. So you look at YouTube and it's like, man, a 3 minute video, a 5 minute video, an hour video, it's not going to happen. But a 30 to 60 second clip where you get that little bite of information that you need, maybe it leads you into that 3 to 5 minute video where now you have a reason to watch it. Um, but the important thing is you get that key mind nugget, that
Right.
that key piece of information out there. And I think it reaches more people because you don't have to kind of bait and switch them and get them into the video, like
Well, and that is totally a pet peeve of mine. I cannot stand the clickbait video clips and images that you see all over the place now where you're like, "Oh my God, something scandalous is about to happen," and nothing happens at all.
right.
That's another one of those tactics that I won't do it.
I think, I don't know, to be proud of your brand and your content, at least for me personally, you kind of just, there's some things you absolutely don't accept, you know, like that's not what we're about, you know.
Exactly. And that's one of those like everybody's got their own style and flavor and method of their madness when it comes to being an influencer. And there's no right or wrong way to do it by any means. Like, please don't misunderstand what I'm saying. Um, but for, at least a portion of us out there, it's important to be genuine and be original and yourself. And that's one thing that I've been very adamant on sticking to is not getting gimmicky, if that's the right word for it. With making solid content that I'm like, yeah, I totally made that, not something that's kind of like, oh, that's like a fluffy insurance commercial,
Right. Let's get into a little bit about what you're doing. I know you're an instructor, you have the website. You also work with Mariner Sales, right?
Yep.
um so let's get into what you have to offer.
So there's a lot of things on that front, depending on which direction you want to go with it. Mariner Sales, that was an opportunity where they needed somebody a few days a week, and that just happened to fit into our tournament schedule for the most part. Um, so I just work there part time, and mostly what I do there is, I'm out on the sale floor, but a lot of people that come in there, they are brandy, shining new.
Right.
They don't know anything about what they're looking at. They kind of walk in and get kind of pale faced because they don't realize how much they're getting into. And a lot of it's really overwhelming. Uh, and those people in particular really need a lot of, um, tailored presentation to figure out, like, the first part of the question is, what sort of fishing are you doing, or what sort of time on the water do you plan on doing? Do you fish big water or small water, moving or still, or there's a lot of factors. And then you have to consider stuff like their physical abilities, so that you're pairing them up into the right vessel. Now, I fish for Old Town, so I am super biased and I love Old Town, but I loved Old Town before I was on their team. They have a very solid line of product. So they're usually the first one that I'll go to. But in some instances, that's not what fits the person, for what they're going to be using it for. And in those instances, you do have to know what do they need to be guided to. And on the flip side of that is the very, either starting into competitive angling, and when they're doing that, they're trying to rig out their boats. And like, I'm sure you and I've done the same thing. I'm sure you did it where you're like, oh, I can DIY everything and I'll save a ton of money. And you totally don't. And sometimes you have to tell them, like, dude, there's already a thing. Yak Attack makes it. You can buy it now and you'll save $100 when you don't have to buy something again. Um, and then there's also the like extreme rigging out where I'm drawing up diagrams for wiring stuff, for lighting and for distribution hubs, and working with our install guys there, who are awesome at their freaking job. Most of the time, I'm just drawing the diagram. They are the ones that are doing all of the work. Occasionally, you'll see me, back in the shop with some tools and stuff, doing installs or repairs. But that's super rare because they're pretty solid doing that, keeping up with their schedule. So at Mariner, yeah, it's like a little bit of all the above, including like product photography for the website and stuff. But when it comes to teaching, that's a whole other animal. With my website and the Women's Fishing Federation.
And you're doing a lot of that at Mariner as well. I mean,
Yeah.
like you said, people come in, they come to you, they're newbies, they're clueless, and at this point it's very overwhelming. And you can spend a lot of money on all the wrong things.
Oh, absolutely.
And you could
It's
spend, a couple of years trying to figure it out. You come in, you talk to somebody like you, and you figure out what is the right fit. That's what's important. It's not the you should have bought a Hobie. Well, no,
right. Like
maybe not.
for some people, I will, you do point them to a Hobie. If somebody tells me that they live on a small lake that is full of thick grass and no open water, a prop drive isn't going to work.
Right.
um,
Absolutely.
so it's not the right fit for them. And if they don't want to paddle, a Hobie drive handles grass extraordinarily well. There's no doubt in that.
Right.
And it's also a matter of, I think a lot of people, or at least from my clientele, what I'm told, because none of us at Mariner make commission. So all of the information and the sales that we're doing, we're genuinely giving you what we think is a good option, because it doesn't benefit us either way. So there's a lot of people that come in there, that, like I said, it's more of just keeping them from getting overwhelmed and saying, like, okay, there's a gazillion things here. Once we narrow down your kayak choices, the accessories are easy. That'll take 2 minutes, and that kind of makes them relax more, which helps them enjoy the process, where it's not this tedious thing to get into this new sport and get your mind blown, where, and same thing with even, I mean, a lot of people come in just to talk about fishing. Like, I would totally be lying if I didn't say that like half of my day is like just talking about fishing and techniques.
Right. But of course, that's why you're there. Right.
Right. Exactly.
That's awesome. So Tell me about your website.
So that was totally like 5 years ago before we left Pittsburgh. Um, you know, there's a lot of stuff on the internet, no doubt at all. Um, but a lot of the fishing content, I didn't feel like it was um thorough enough in some cases or diverse enough in some cases where, you can only tell somebody so many ways to throw a Texas rig, and when you have 100 articles on just throwing a Texas rig, it kind of gets boring. And it's the same thing for, like if you only do one type of video and only DIY stuff or only this or that. Um, and I wanted to expand beyond just using social media to reach people, because frankly, you don't own your content on social media. It can be taken down at any time. I'm sure everybody knows that by now. Uh, and my website is actually hard coded. I code my whole website. I don't use a program of any kind like WordPress or any of those things. A lot of people ask me about that, and I tell them, I added classes on to my degree to learn how to code a website. I can't really help them learn how to do that on the fly.
Right.
But I wanted to own my content and have complete control over it. And that also gives you like total freedom of expression on there. So it was a way to teach people, entertain people, to engage them. I get a lot of people they don't even know what kayak fishing is. If you do even just a Google search on my name, you'll see a whole bunch of stuff come up. And like one of the most popular um, articles on my website is actually how to clean your bait caster, of all things. Like, because I use a combination of photos and drawing and writing and video and all the above, sometimes in the same article. And that draws people in to where they're like, oh, holy crap, there's like all kinds of other stuff here. Um, so yeah, I just thought I wanted a platform that I had free reign over to just turn into a fishing playground.
I forget who said it, but the saying goes, you can have 1,000 people say the same thing, but only one of them say it the right way for you. And
Right.
that's basically what it comes down to. We all learn differently. You know, it's just getting more people into the sport, educating them, and giving you a platform.
Right. And like another thing, I mean, it's just like silly stuff. Like last year I put out a bunch of free downloadable fishing coloring pages, by no means specifically made for kids. Like lots of people now, everybody's stressed out all the time. I mean, who doesn't want to just pick up a coloring page and go to town? So
Right.
there's even stuff like that where, you can even reach the littles before they even really know what they're doing.
Yeah, that's always fun, especially in the classroom or
Right.
you know, home classroom. Today's podcast brought to you by Lake Erie Kayakfishing.com. Come along with me and experience one of the best freshwater fisheries in the world while chasing monsters kayak fishing Lake Erie. We now return to the show. So, what about the Women's Fishing Federation? Tell me about that.
So that is an organization that was started by Christine Fisher, Amanda Brannon, and Mel Isaacs. They wanted to make it an organization that empowered women. Our motto is actually dedicated to fostering women's involvement in the sport of fishing through education, camaraderie, and support. And as a lot of ladies know, it is not always easy to be in a large group of ladies, but it's way easier when you realize every single person here is a big fishing nerd, and that's all we want to talk about is fishing. Nobody there cares about what you're wearing or any of that stuff. It's literally just we want to go fishing, we want to learn more about fishing, and we want to learn more about how to go fishing more.
Right.
So that they created the organization and made a what they call the kayak fishing experience, which is a handful of days. Pretty much, it's like sleepover camp for adults. We go to a venue. This year we were at Lake Fork Marina. Everybody has accommodations. Your entry buys your all of your meals, all of your classes. We, they're super fortunate that we have a lot of really great sponsors that help us build sick swag bags. So I mean, your entry fee into that more than covers the gear that you're going to get just from going to the event. Um, the last 2 years, they've been able to do a rod and reel combo for every lady, in addition to an entire recyclable shopping bag full of stuff. And then on top of it, you get one-on-one instruction. You've got people who are really schooled in what they do. And when you bring all of us together as instructors, it creates a really awesome atmosphere where you are way less intimidated to ask questions and get involved, rather than, like, not to take anything away from them, but a lot of expos and seminars and whatnot, people are speaking at you. They're not speaking with you. And especially when there's huge numbers in attendance. So this is a way for all of us to reach other female anglers, to empower them to say, you can absolutely do this. You don't need anybody to help you do it. Like, it's nice to have help, and it's okay to ask for it too. That's like a whole other dynamic that's hard to teach. But that they can do these things, and they're much more capable than they realize.
Yeah, I like that. It's a lot different than, especially like social media. A lot of people, they're maybe afraid to ask those questions because of, the
The
keyboard
mob.
warriors and all that. So this creates, just an atmosphere where ladies can get together with like-minded individuals and grow and learn and
Absolutely. and
share.
and not only that, but the friendships that you build there really are genuinely good friendships. I have some of my closest friends now are people specifically from those events. You do really get to connect with each other on a whole other level. And that's the whole point. That's part of the experience, is getting to connect with each other too. So you don't feel so awkward in this industry that is wholly male dominated. Obviously, all of us are trying very hard to make a dent in that. But there's still quite a long ways to go to start skewing those numbers.
Yeah, I think there was an article here locally where I think up to 50% of the people on the river fly fishing nowadays are women.
And that's awesome.
And I think that has just changed within the last 3 or 5 years. I'll look that up and send that your way.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me, especially with the pandemic and everything. That really skyrocketed a lot of people into our sport. I mean, in bonkers numbers. Um, and that included ladies, especially ones that had no idea what they were doing, but they're like, my kids are making me crazy and I need to take them outside to do something. Like, let's go fishing.
Right. And they need somebody like you and somebody like the Women's Fishing Federation, to try to shorten the learning curve and
Absolutely.
show them the way. So what are some of the things that ladies can learn during the kayak fishing experience?
So we cover pretty much everything front to back. So we'll start with safety topics, and rigging. Pretty much start at the beginning. So, all of your safety gear that you should have, or at least consider having some of it. And then we'll move on to how to rig out your boat, so helping them figure out ideas for what will work well for them for fish finders, and if they need an anchor or if they want to do a power pole. And then moving on into actual rigging of gear. So we'll start with a how to use your bait caster. And that was a class that kind of morphed into that last year, because I was actually supposed to teach a real maintenance class on pretty much how to disassemble a bait caster entirely to maintenance it yourself. Um, but what I realized when I started the class was there was a lot of people there that had never even used one. So me telling them how to break it down was totally irrelevant at that point. So it turns into just how to use a fishing rod, a spinning rod or a bait caster. And then Christine, goes into depth on choosing your rods, and your line and whatnot, and what things are used for what applications. And then we'll go into different techniques, and breaking it down all the way to how to read a fish finder. And really important stuff like how to flip your kayak if you flip it, and how to self-rescue. So we do, pretty much we run the gamut of this is how you do all this stuff. We even cover stuff. This year we added a really awesome program where we also talked about becoming an influencer. How do you break into the market, so to speak? And there's a lot of people that don't appreciate the fact that even if you think you are not anything special, you have a niche market. I guarantee you there are a million people out there just like you. If you are a 50-year-old empty nester lady who is moving across the country and you're also into cycling, you will find a demographic of ladies that are like, oh my God, that is my story. That happens all the time. So that's, something we try to encourage them. Like, no, as much as you think you're very ordinary, there are extraordinary things about you that will reach people on every level.
Right. So what kind of kayak are you in? You're in an old
Uh,
town.
yes, I'm in an Old Town Predator PDL, which
Okay.
has now been branded as the Big Water PDL. I am still in the Predator, purely because I like the color red, and that's the color of my boat, and I don't want to change it. And that's all that comes down to. And there hasn't been, the Big Water didn't change enough for me to change colors. So I am essentially running the same boat.
They're the same boat. I'm in the big water because my favorite color is blue.
Yet, see, it happens like that.
Awesome, awesome machines though.
Oh my God. That's one thing that not a lot of people realize is, dude, hands down, the Predator and the Salty, they're the fastest boats on the market. It's easy to pull 5 miles an hour. And
Oh yeah.
most people don't appreciate that until you're on the water doing like 2 miles an hour. And you're like, wow, this is going to take me 4 days to get over there. When like in the Predator, especially if you happen to be in a shotgun start kayak fishing event, you will just absolutely smoke your competition off the gun.
Right. So I had mentioned earlier, I think before the show, this weekend we have the Lake Erie Walleye Trail event number 4 for the boats, and me in the big water. And we're doing the debut of the kayak division, and Irene Roth is going to be competing. What advice could you give her on technique? How could she pull this off? Because she's going to be out there on Lake Erie by herself, competing against, some of the best walleye anglers on the lake. And I want to make sure that she's safe and able to get back in her boat.
So first thing is to make sure that whatever vest that she chooses is a good fit for her. That's number one on the list. Um, like for example, Mustang has a vest that is a dual flotation vest. So it gives you about 9 pounds of lift without it being inflated. So it's got a foam core to it, and it also has inflation with it. So you can choose to pop that to give you more inflation if, if you're starting to tire out or whatnot. So definitely PFD number one. Lake Erie can be super sketchy really fast. So I would definitely make sure she's got some extra cartridges with her if she is wearing an inflatable.
We generally try to avoid the inflatables out on Lake Erie. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
And
pretty often for you to end up, and I try to teach. I mean, mainly because half the season it's cold water.
I was
Those
just
things
going to
don't
say,
really function.
what's the max temps up there? I'm not familiar with them.
Right now the water temperature is about 65, I think. I think it was
Ooh.
today.
Yeah. Yeah. So in that situation, I would absolutely go with just a straight vest.
Yeah.
Um, because that is, and that's another thing to make sure that, she understands is that hypothermia kicks in really fast. But when it comes to re-entering or prior to re-entering your boat, how you rig your boat up is very important.
Right.
So if you want to carry 300 pounds of gear, that is totally your right to do so. But just keep in mind, you're going to have to roll over 300 pounds of gear. Um, and a big part of, kayak fishing, there's a lot of people that are really into tethering everything, with leashes.
Hmm.
Um, which I'm okay with that for, like, on my boat, I have my pliers are leashed and my phone is leashed. Other than that, everything else is cinched down or clipped into something. And the reason I do that is if you flip upside down completely with your boat and your gear, and you've got 9 rods on leashes, and all of that falls down around you, you're now stuck in a spaghetti monster of hooks and leashes. Um, so it's much easier to self-rescue if you don't have a bunch of stuff tangling you up. Um, so how you rig it up is important. And that also goes for having a clear side to re-enter from, which is something a lot of people don't think about. So in the cockpit of your boat, lots of people have a ton of accessories now. They'll have a fish finder, they'll have, a phone holder, they'll have lights and all this stuff. Well, if you've got that staggered on both sides down your entire cockpit, you've given yourself no place to re-enter the boat. So, like, for example, on my boat personally, I have my fish finder is mounted way up front on, the bow of my boat on the front plate rather than on the side tracks. And it is very low profile there. I keep nothing else on those tracks other than just one camera mount that I don't keep a camera on 99% of the time. Um, that way, both of my rails are completely open for me to re-enter from the side without getting stuck on something or just injuring yourself trying to throw yourself up onto, some piece of equipment. But beyond that, when it comes to re-entering, this year when Jeff and I taught that class for the fishing or the kayak fishing experience, um, the lady who volunteered to flip had never done so before. And she was trying to wrap her brain around the same thing. Like, how do you climb in if you can't climb? The best way I was able to describe this to her in the moment that I will now forever be teaching people with this visual is when you go on summer vacation and you're hanging out at the pool, most people at some point will go up to the side of the pool and they'll lay their hands on the side and put their head on their hands. And then you let your backside float up and you're just kind of floating and chilling there and kind of like sunbathing. You do that same exact motion to prepare yourself to get into the boat.
Right.
Get up onto your side rail, let your body float up behind you, and then you start kicking to high hell until you push yourself straight across and back into the boat. It's a super unnatural motion. The best visual for it is a sea lion coming up onto the ice and sliding across it. That's exactly what you're doing. The most important part of that is keep kicking. Like, think of the cheering section, of a football game screaming at you to keep going, keep kicking, kick harder. That's what you need to tell yourself, because especially in cold water, you're only going to be able to try this like once or twice before you wear out.
Well,
So the execution is super important.
during about 6 months of the year, we're all in dry suits around here. There are some people that are risking their lives, but you know, for the majority, most people are in dry suits prepared for all that stuff. Because it will take your life, and like you said, you got 1 or 2 attempts when
Right.
you're in cold water to get back in your kayak. So if you haven't practiced before and you make that mistake, you fall out in cold water, even in warm water, now you're in a dangerous situation trying to figure out how to do it.
Right. And that's, they make a lot of different options for assist tools. They make paddle floats that you can basically turn into a stirrup to use to get yourself back up. They make rescue ladders. But really all you need is a piece of lashing or paracord, just something to hang a drop loop over the side, just to give yourself a footing to get up into it. But if you are in the instance of you don't have any of those things, you can absolutely get back into your boat without them. It is just one of those things that you really have to have that come to Jesus moment with yourself of like, okay, this is actually for my life. I've got to kick as hard as I possibly can to get up in there. And then once you get up onto your boat, you are going to be like a fish out of water. You're going to look ridiculous trying to flip your butt over and everything. But just as long as you get back up there, that's all that matters.
Right. Yeah, the stirrup thing, with the strap, the biggest challenge with the currents, it kind of ends up sucking your body underneath.
Right.
So the easiest way I've found, is just kicking your feet, being parallel with the water surface and just kind of propelling yourself on. Um, but she was struggling with it. She's wearing I think it's made by Australia, if I said that right, the PFD. And she was just, she wasn't fully getting her body parallel to the water surface, and she was struggling with it, which tomorrow night we'll probably be out dialing it back in.
What kind of boat is she in?
She's in a big water
Oh,
132,
she is.
and
Um,
it's got a Hummingbird Helix 7 on the left side, and the Yak Attack Omega Pros on the 8-inch extensions on both sides for trolling. But she does have that space between the rod holder on the one side and the seat to be able to climb back in. I was even thinking maybe climbing in from the bow.
right. So, I've not attempted that. That could be tricky, and that's actually something this summer that I have been that I might actually try to execute in a controlled setting. Is trying to see how ridiculous you can get with where you can walk on your boat, and get back into it because that is a thing to try to figure out all the different points that you could do it at. Um, the biggest thing I see being a problem coming from from the bow, there's nothing to grab onto.
Right.
Um, where if you're coming in from the sides, especially on the big water, your drive hole that's up in the top, that little handle that's right in front of you, you can use that in addition to the next handle on the side of your boat across from you, not the one directly in front of you, and use those two to kind of balance yourself while you're getting up onto the side of the boat. Um, so that's another thing to keep in mind. Try to reach across it. Don't reach right in front of you for whatever you're trying to grab onto, because then you just end up smacking your face with a kayak.
Right. Yeah, what I did was I took one of the Rogue Fishing Company, the adjustable drag straps, and I put it on the end of her PFD, and I set it to where she could reach over the bow and grab that strap. And then I made like another stirrup a little bit further up. That way she could almost kind of ladder herself up. But going over the front wasn't working out either. I think she
Yeah,
just needs
it
to just
I
get
was
parallel to the water surface, let her butt. I'm gonna tell her what you said, about just kind of sitting at the edge of the pool, put your
yep,
chin up, just let your butt float up and just kick.
yep.
I
And
think
that's
that's the
really, I mean, you are just trying to propel yourself across the boat, not not so much into it, think trying to go across the whole thing.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. I'm sure you have some videos floating around on how to do it.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think Jeff Little just happened to release the one of us from the kayak fishing experience
Right, right.
on the little things on
Yeah,
YouTube.
on the little stuff
Or the little stuff,
YouTube
that's right.
channel. I will absolutely link Jeff Little's YouTube channel down below. There's thousands of hours of invaluable resources from that guy. If you're not following him, you're doing yourself a disservice for sure.
Absolutely.
How can people find you? How do they reach out to you?
So like I said, you can find me at fishlikeacat.com. You can also find me on Facebook under Katie Backa. Also Fish Like a Cat has its own page. You can also look on Instagram. That's also under Fish Like a Cat and Katie Backa. My YouTube channel is Katie Backa. And you can search hashtags for any of all of the above, including hashtag Team Backa, which is my husband and I both. And we have content together as well. So all of those outlets, but my website has a links page to all of my outlets. So that's like the easiest way for people to just click down the list and find all of them.
Oh, perfect. I will drop all the links in the description as well. So it's real easy to get a hold of you. If you're anywhere near the Mariner sales, in what city in Texas?
In Dallas, Texas.
If you're anywhere near the Mariner sales in Dallas, Texas, definitely call them up, stop up and see Katie. She will set you up, talk to you about which kayak to pick, which one is best for you, and what the best accessories to pair it with.
And I'll add to that you guys can totally reach out to me, even on Facebook Messenger with the same questions if I'm not at work, because I only work there part-time. So I'm more than happy to answer questions across all of those as well.
Yeah, she is absolutely a resource. Definitely on the ladies side of things, but most importantly on the kayak fishing side of things and the angler side of things. She's got a ton of knowledge, ton of skills to share. So, don't be afraid. Send her a message. I'm sure she'll hit you up.
Absolutely.
Well, Katie, thanks for coming on the show. I appreciate it. Hey guys, thanks for listening to the show. Don't forget to leave us a review and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening app. We will see you on the next episode. And remember, for me, fishing is life.